Chapter 1. The Sky That Burned Without Mercy. The city was burning, and yet the people did not cry out as they once had in the early days of the war. There was no panic left in them, only the dull repetition of fear, like the tolling of a bell that had rung too long and now simply quivered in the background of existence. Above, the sky was ripped open by fire and wings, vast, searing shapes blotting out the stars, wings like living storms, dragons circling in furious arcs. Their roars did not sound like triumph, but like lamentations, as though even they mourned the necessity of what was happening. Below, in the ruined streets of Saint Veyra, a city once known for its cathedrals and learning, men fought with trembling hands. They held their spears and their rusted blades, not in the name of honor or glory, but as starving beggars clutch a last crust of bread. The enemy was endless, creatures born from the bowels of the earth itself, grotesque amalgamations of scale and fang, crawling nightmares that seemed to carry with them the stench of mankind's own sins. Every strike, every scream echoed against the stone walls now blackened by fire. Ivan Petrovich stood among them, a man of 35 whose hollow eyes betrayed the exhaustion of a soul stretched too thin. He leaned on his spear, blood dripping from its tip, though whether the blood belonged to beast or man he did not know. His uniform, once proud and orderly, was torn, his hands raw, yet his mind would not be silent. In every roar of dragon fire, in every convulsion of the dying earth, a question gnawed at him. What is the worth of survival if it strips from us all that was once human? He remembered in a strange, fragmentary way, the church of his youth, the light through colored glass, the smell of incense, the murmur of priests who promised that life was not without meaning. And here he was, watching men and dragons fighting shoulder to shoulder, as though heaven and hell had conspired to tear apart the earth and leave behind only confusion. His lips moved, before he realized he was speaking. "Tell me, what salvation is this?" But no one answered. The smoke swallowed his words, and the battle pressed on. The weight of conscience. Night fell heavy, though the fires made it brighter than day. The creatures retreated for a moment, licking their wounds, gathering strength, leaving the soldiers huddled in the square, catching their breath. It was then that Ivan felt the familiar hand of Mikhail on his shoulder. Mikhail, broad-shouldered, with a beard singed from dragonfire, still wore around his neck the cross that gleamed stubbornly amidst the filth. His eyes burned not with fear, but with faith, the kind of faith that Ivan had long abandoned. "You look as if the earth itself betrayed you," Mikhail said, voice low but firm. Ivan forced a laugh that died in his throat. "Has it not? Tell me honestly, Mikhail, do you still believe? Do you still see in this—" He gestured upward where a dragon's silhouette eclipsed the moon. "The hand of God?" Mikhail did not flinch. "Yes, perhaps more than ever. The dragons are not punishment. They are trial. They are the fire through which man must walk to be purified." Ivan turned sharply, his eyes flashing. "Purified? Look around you! Children crushed beneath stones, women turned to ash. Is this purification, or is it only chaos dressed in your illusions?" A chuckle, bitter and sharp, cut through their exchange. Sergei, thin and hollow-faced, emerged from the shadows. He was a man who had once been a student of philosophy, a dreamer of revolutions. Now his cynicism was all that kept him alive. He spat into the dirt, his lips twisted. "Faith, faith, always faith. It's the opium of the dying. Look at him, Ivan. He would kneel before the dragon itself and call it divine if it gave him a reason to keep breathing. But I say, there is no reason. The dragons burn, the beasts crawl, men die, and the world spins into the abyss. Nothing more. Ivan closed his eyes. The voices clashed inside him, like blades. He wanted to shout, to silence them both, but instead his voice trembled. Then what are we? Animals? Clinging to existence with no hope? Or saints, tested by fire? Tell me, Sergei, if all is meaningless, why do you still fight? Sergei's grin faltered, but only for a moment. Habit, he muttered. The body fights, though the soul is already dead. And Ivan felt the chill run through him. The dragon's eye. The night deepened. Then came a sound that silenced even the most hardened soldiers. The crash of a body larger than a cathedral. The ground trembled. From the smoke, a dragon emerged, its colossal form collapsing in the square. Its scales were scorched, its left wing torn. Blood, black and steaming, flowed like a river. The men froze. To approach a dragon was to invite death, and yet there it lay, struggling, its breath rattling like thunder in a hollow cavern. Ivan stepped closer, as if drawn by invisible strings. Its eye, golden and immense, turned toward him. For a moment he felt that it pierced him to the marrow. There was no hatred in that gaze, no rage, but something else, something unfathomable. It looks at me, Ivan whispered, trembling. Do you see it? It looks as though it listens, as though it judges. Mikhail did not flinch. It is a sign. The beast carries a soul, just as we do. God speaks through its silence. Sergei scoffed, though his voice shook. You're both mad. It's an animal dying. Nothing more. But Ivan could not look away. The dragon's eye seemed to hold his sins, his doubts, his secret yearning for an answer that had never come. And for a fleeting instant, he thought he saw mercy there. Or was it accusation? His heart thundered. He whispered, If it has a soul, then what are we, who slay with it side by side? Are we its brethren, or its executioners? The dragon closed its eye, and Ivan felt as though it had spoken. The great battle. The earth convulsed. From the fissures came a wave of creatures, twisted horrors with claws like sickles, eyes glowing with hatred, their screeches splitting the night. The soldiers scrambled to their feet. The dragon, though dying, roared with a final defiance, fire spewing from its broken throat. Stand! Mikhail shouted, lifting his sword. Sergei laughed, the laugh of despair, and joined the fray. The battle was frenzy. Ivan fought like a man possessed, his spear thrusting into snarling jaws, his body drenched in blood and sweat. Dragons swooped from above, searing the night with rivers of flame. The ground shook with the struggle of titans. Yet there was no triumph. Each victory was mutilated by the cries of the fallen, by the horror of what they had become. Men fighting as beasts, beside beasts, against beasts. At one moment, Ivan stumbled, falling beside the dying dragon. Its body shielded him from the claws of a creature. Its eye flickered open once more, and he swore it saw him not as a soldier, not as a killer, but as a man. He wept as he thrust his spear upward, ending the beast that had sought his throat. The aftermath. Dawn came. The creatures retreated, leaving silence broken only by the crackling of fire. The men stood in ruins. Few had survived. Ivan knelt in the ash, his hands trembling. Mikhail lay beside him, alive, but bloodied, clutching his cross as if it was his last breath. Sergei sat against a broken wall, staring blankly, his lips curled in a ghost of a smile. The dragon lay still. Its body was cold. Ivan touched its scales with a reverence he did not understand. What are we now? Whispered. Saviors or monsters? Have we defended mankind or betrayed it by becoming what we fight? No one answered. The silence itself was the answer. And in that silence, Ivan felt the crushing weight of a truth he could not name, a truth that pressed upon him like the sky itself, vast and unbearable. Perhaps salvation was not in victory, but in enduring the unbearable, in carrying the guilt of survival. The dawn bled over the ruins, and the world, indifferent, went on. Chapter 2. The Weight of Blood. The city lay in ruins, but for the first time since night had fallen, silence pressed upon it. Not peace, no, for peace is an ordered silence, chosen, sanctified. This was a silence of exhaustion, the hollow emptiness that follows the scream of the dying. Ash drifted in the air like snow, settling upon the faces of the living and the dead alike, so that even the fallen appeared as though they wore a strange, pale mask of serenity. Ivan Petrovich sat on the broken steps of what had once been a library. His hands, stained with blood and ash, trembled without ceasing. He stared at them as if they belonged to someone else, as if he had been merely a spectator to the slaughter, though the pain in his muscles told him otherwise. His thoughts coiled inward, dark and suffocating. If every life I have taken still lingers in me, then surely I am no man, but a graveyard of souls. Beside him, Michael knelt in prayer, his lips moving rapidly, his voice hoarse yet firm. He clutched the small iron cross at his chest, as though it anchored him to something greater than this ruin. Sergei, meanwhile, had found a bottle of scorched brandy amidst the wreckage, and now drank as if each swallow might erase not only the taste of blood, but the very memory of existence. The three of them, bound together by necessity, yet each inhabiting a different world of thought. Ivan broke the silence first. "Do you ever wonder," he said, his voice low, "whether we are saving mankind or only prolonging its suffering? Each time we drive the creatures back, the cost grows heavier. What remains of us in the end?" Michael lifted his gaze, eyes reddened by both smoke and prayer. "Suffering is the crucible in which man is made whole. Without it, what are we? It is not victory that redeems us, Ivan, but the endurance of suffering in the light of faith." Sergei barked a laugh, bitter and sharp. "The endurance of suffering? Tell that to the children buried beneath these stones, to the women burned alive in the cathedrals. If your God exists, he is either blind or cruel, and perhaps both. No, Ivan, don't let Michael's pious babbling seduce you. There is no redemption. We are animals gnawing at the bones of a world already dead." Ivan's eyes narrowed. "Then why fight, Sergei? If all is meaningless, why not lay down and let the beasts tear you apart?" Sergei took another long drink, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. His expression shifted, just for a moment, betraying something softer, despair perhaps, or even longing. But it passed quickly, replaced by his usual sneer. "Habit," he said. "The body fights even when the soul has ceased to believe in the fight." Ivan fell silent. His mind drifted, unbidden, to memories of his childhood. The golden light through stained-glass windows, the solemn hymns, the gentle voice of the priest telling him that every man carried within him a spark of the divine. He had believed once, with the unshakable certainty of youth, and yet here he was, sitting in a city where divine order had been devoured by fire and claw. Perhaps faith is only another form of habit, he thought. And perhaps despair is too. Visions in Ash. That night, as others scavenged for food or collapsed in uneasy sleep, Ivan wandered alone through the charred streets. His steps led him back to the square where the dragon had fallen. Its vast body remained there, now still, its scales glistening faintly in the firelight. The soldiers had dared not approach it, though children, or what remained of them, had tried to pry loose fragments of scale before being driven off. Ivan stood before the corpse as though before an altar. The dragon's eye, though lifeless, seemed yet to hold the echo of that gaze he could not forget. He shivered. "You haunt me," he whispered. "You who were neither man nor God, but something between. You knew, didn't you? You saw into me, and you knew what I was." And suddenly he was overcome, sinking to his knees, pressing his forehead against the cold, scorched scale. He wept, not for the dragon, nor for the city, but for himself, for all that had died within him long before this war had begun. The stranger dragon. By dawn, the silence was broken again, this time not by the creatures of the abyss, but by a sound heavy and deliberate, the thunder of wings descending. Panic erupted among the survivors until they saw it, another dragon, this one scarred but alive, its scales blackened by smoke. It landed heavily in the ruins, lowering its massive head toward the men as if acknowledging them. Mikhail fell to his knees at once, tears streaming down his soot-streaked face. "A sign," he cried, "a sign that God has not abandoned us." Sergei spat on the ground, though his voice trembled despite himself. "Or perhaps the beasts seek to tame us as hounds, to use us until we are no longer useful." Ivan stood frozen, torn between awe and terror. The dragon's golden eyes swept over the crowd, lingering on him. He felt exposed again, as though all his doubts and sins had been laid bare. The soldiers raised their weapons instinctively, but Ivan lifted his voice, firm for the first time in days. "Do not strike. It does not come as enemy. Look at it, wounded like us. It has come because it has no other place to go." The dragon lowered its head further, almost touching the ground before Ivan. The men murmured among themselves, torn between fear and reverence. And in that moment, Ivan understood, whether it was beast or something more, this dragon had chosen to stand with them. Dialogue of the Damned. That night they gathered in what remained of the church. The dragon lay outside, its immense body curled like a sentinel in the ruins. Inside, the men debated. Mikhail spoke fervently. "Do you not see? This is providence. God has sent us allies. Creatures once feared now turn to instruments of his will. Through them we shall endure." Sergei spat on the ground, though his voice trembled despite himself. "Or perhaps the beasts seek to tame us as hounds, to use us until we are no longer useful." Ivan stood frozen, torn between awe and terror. The dragon's golden eyes swept over the crowd, lingering on him. He felt exposed again, as though all his doubts and sins had been laid bare. The soldiers raised their weapons instinctively, but Ivan lifted his voice, firm for the first time in days. "Do not strike. It does not come as enemy. Look at it, wounded, like us. It has come because it has no other place to go." The dragon lowered its head further, almost touching the ground before Ivan. The men murmured among themselves, torn between fear and reverence. And in that moment, Ivan understood. Whether it was beast or something more, this dragon had chosen to stand with them. Closing of the chapter. When Ivan finally slept that night, he dreamed of the dragon's eye, burning golden in the darkness. He saw himself reflected in it, not a soldier, not a sinner, but something unnameable, a figure walking a narrow bridge suspended over the abyss. And in the dream, he asked, "Is survival redemption or only delay?" But no voice answered, only silence, vast and unyielding as the bridge trembled beneath him. Chapter 3. Confessions in the Dark. The city above smoldered, but the survivors descended into its bowels. Beneath Saint Veyra lay a labyrinth of catacombs, ancient corridors once used by monks and scholars to bury their dead and safeguard their texts. Now, those who remained alive huddled there, not in reverence, but in desperation. The air was damp and heavy with mold, and the dripping of unseen water echoed like the slow ticking of a clock counting down to doom. The dragon followed them, Its vast bulk scraped against the stone as it lowered itself into the cavern's entrance, curling with uneasy grace, its wings folding awkwardly against walls never meant for such enormity. And yet, in the suffocating dark, its presence did not crush, but rather shielded the men, as though even the monstrous shape provided a kind of grim protection against the terrors above. Ivan walked at its side, torch in hand, his face half lit, half lost in shadow. The golden eyes of the dragon caught the light, burning softly in the darkness like two suns extinguished but not yet dead. He felt them upon him with every step. "Why do you watch me so?" he thought. "Do you wait for me to confess what I dare not say aloud?" Whispers among the tombs. They gathered in a chamber lined with the bones of centuries past, skulls grinning through dust, silent witnesses to the degradation of the living. Fires were lit. The men huddled, some whispering prayers, others weeping silently, still others drinking whatever remained of brandy or bitter wine. Mikhail rose, his towering figure outlined against the firelight. His beard, singed and ragged, could not conceal the fervor in his eyes. "Brothers," he began, his voice carrying through the chamber, "do not despair. We are not forsaken. Have we not seen the sign? Have we not fought with fire beside us, not against us? This dragon, this mighty beast, has descended not as our executioner, but as our comrade. Surely it is providence. Surely the Lord, in his unfathomable wisdom, has turned our enemies into allies." A murmur ran through the men, some nodding eagerly, others shifting uneasily. Then Sergei's voice, sharp and cutting, pierced the murmur. "Providence! Ha! You twist words like a drunkard twists his tongue. If this was providence, then it is a cruel comedy. Look around you, Mikhail. Bones, ashes, despair. This chamber is no temple, it is a grave. And you call it holy? You kneel before the beast outside as though it were Christ himself. You disgust me." Gasps rose, but Sergei's hollow laughter swallowed them. He staggered forward, bottle in hand, his thin frame trembling as though he were nothing more, the nerves stretched taut. "You want confession? Here is mine. I once believed. Yes, I once wrote with fire in my heart of liberty, of justice, of a new dawn for men. And what became of it? Blood, blood in the streets. I watched children starve while priests preached patience. I saw men rot in prisons for daring to ask why. And when I begged God for an answer, he was silent. Silent! Just as this dragon is silent now. Do not fool yourselves. Its gaze is not divine. It is empty. We stare into it and see only ourselves, beasts cloaked in the illusion of meaning." He collapsed against the stone, breathing heavily, his laughter dissolving into a cough. Ivan's confession. The chamber fell into an uneasy quiet. All eyes turned to Ivan, who had sat unmoving, his torch burning low in his hand. His face was pale, his eyes distant. He said, "I too must confess. For Sergei is right in one thing. Silence. It is the silence that devours us." He raised his gaze, and his eyes burned with a strange fever. "When I was a boy, I believed in order, in justice. My brother believed more than I did. He was gentle, devout, a soul of purity. He believed the world was a mirror of God's light. And when the war came, he too took up arms, but with faith in his heart. Do you know how he died?" No one answered. Ivan's hands trembled. "He died not by beast, nor by dragon, but by me. In the chaos of battle, I struck, blindly, wildly. My spear, meant for the creature, pierced his chest. I felt his blood on my hands before I even knew whose it was. And as he fell, he did not curse me. He smiled. He smiled as if to forgive. That smile has haunted me ever since. Tell me, what is forgiveness worth when the guilt is unbearable? His cry cracked. He bowed his head, gripping his skull as though to crush the memory within it. Mikhail rushed to him, kneeling, seizing his trembling hands. "Brother, do not despair. You did not choose this fate. The world is fire and confusion. Who can claim clean hands in such chaos? Your brother's smile was true. It was the grace of God shining even in death. Believe it." Sergei's laughter cut through again, hoarse and bitter. "Grace? No, Ivan. Your brother smiled because he was deluded. He died in ignorance, thinking meaning where there is none. And you suffer because deep inside, you know the truth. There is no forgiveness, not from God, not from dragons, not from the dead." Ivan's cry echoed through the chamber, half anguish, half rage. Then what remains? If not forgiveness, then what? Must I live as a murderer even when I sought to save? The debate collapsed into sobbing silence. Then, from the entrance, a low rumble. The dragon. It shifted, its body scraping against stone as it lowered itself into the cavern's entrance, curling with uneasy grace, its wings folding awkwardly against walls never meant for such enormity. And yet, in the suffocating dark, its presence did not crush, but rather shielded the men, as though even the monstrous shape provided a kind of grim protection against the terrors above. Ivan walked at its side, torch in hand, his face half lit, half lost in shadow. The golden eyes of the dragon caught the light, burning softly in the darkness like two suns, extinguished but not yet dead. He felt them upon him with every step. "Why do you watch me so?" he thought. "Do you wait for me to confess what I dare not say aloud?" Ivan stumbled forward until he stood only steps away from its massive head. His voice trembled. You see me, don't you? You know what I am. Say it then. Condemn me, or absolve me, anything but this silence." The dragon blinked, slow and deliberate. A sound rose from its chest, not a roar, not speech, but something between breath and thunder. It filled the chamber, reverberating through the bones of the dead. And yet no word came. Ivan fell to his knees, crutching his chest, tears streaming down his face. "Even you will not answer. Then truly there is only silence." Mikhail, however, fell prostrate, tears of awe streaming from his eyes. "No, do you not feel it? The silence is the answer. The divine does not shout, it whispers in the void. The dragon's gaze is not emptiness, but the weight of eternity." Sergei spat blood, shaking his head. "No, fool. It is the abyss, and the abyss has no tongue." Closing of chapter 3. That night, no man slept. Some prayed, some wept, some sharpened blades with trembling hands. Ivan sat beside the dragon, its slow breath rising and falling like the tide. He pressed his back against its scales, eyes open, unable to close them for fear of the visions within. In the darkness of the catacombs, the living spoke their confessions, and the dead listened in the silence. The dragon's eyes burned steadily, neither condemning nor forgiving, only reflecting. The accent of man was not in absolution, but in the unbearable burden of being seen. The catacombs had no clocks, but all felt the shift in the air when night crept above. It was as though the earth itself tensed, waiting. The silence that had smothered them all day gave way to distant, muffled sounds, shrieks, roars, and something stranger, something like the weeping of metal bending under impossible weight. The men stirred. Weapons were lifted, torches reignited, prayers muttered like broken teeth clicking in the mouth. Ivan rose slowly, his limbs heavy as lead, for though he had not slept, He felt the dizziness of one who dreams while awake. His brother's face still floated before him, that last forgiving smile, twisting in the firelight of his mind. The dragon lifted its head. Its nostrils flared, and a tremor ran through its vast body. It turned toward the stairway leading back to the surface, as though something had beckoned it. The sound that escaped its throat this time was low, mournful, not thunder, not command, but lament. The first signs. Sergei, drunk and half mad, began laughing again. Hear that? Even the beast mourns what comes. Oh, Mikhail, where is your providence now? Will your holy fire protect us from what we cannot even name? Mikhail rose, his axe clutched tightly. His voice was strained, not from lack of faith, but from the weight of proving it again and again. If we are to die, then let us die with fire in our hands, not tears. Better to face the end standing than crawling. The others nodded, though their eyes betrayed dread. Then came the first scream. Human, above ground, a shriek torn from lungs stretched until they ripped. It echoed down the stone stairway, bounced through the skulls on the walls, and settled in the marrow of every man present. Another followed, then another. And beneath the screams, another sound, a chittering, wet and metallic, as though insects of iron and flesh dragged themselves over stone. The emergence. The men surged to the stairway. Ivan led, torch held high, though every step felt like walking into the throat of a nightmare. The dragon followed, immense wings scraping the ceiling until the walls cracked. Above, the city no longer smoldered, it boiled. Fires erupted in the ruins like volcanoes, and the air itself shimmered with heat and shadow. But it was not only fire. Shapes moved in the smoke. Grotesque, shifting creatures, neither beast nor man. Some had the faces of wolves stretched across bodies of twisted men. Others crawled on limbs too many to count. Eyes blinking like lanterns scattered across their hides. Their cries were not of hunger, but of anguish, as though existence itself was a wound too sharp to bear. And in the center, towering above them all, was something worse. A being half-shrouded in wings of shadow, its torso human-like but faceless, its arms branching into dozens of tendrils that clutched screaming bodies, dragging them into its abyssal chest. Sergei fell to his knees. His bottle clattered to the stones. It's them! It's the ones I dreamed of! Oh, God! No, not God. Not God. Mikhail lifted his axe and roared. Forward! For the living! For the dead! The dragon surged upward, and the night exploded. The battle. It began with fire. The dragon's chest expanded, and from its throat poured not flame, but a torrent of molten light, searing the air itself. The creature shrieked, their twisted forms writhing and collapsing in heaps of burning flesh. Yet from every fallen corpse, two more seemed to emerge, crawling from within like nightmares birthing themselves without end. The men charged to the stairway, their torches and blades feeble beside the dragon's might, yet they still fought. Every stroke of steel was met with shrieks and ichor. Some men fell immediately, dragged screaming into the swarm, their limbs torn like paper. Others fought madly, laughing in despair, hacking until buried in claws. Ivan moved among them like one possessed, his blade cut, his torch swung. But more than rage, guided him was guilt. Every strike was a prayer to his brother, every wound a plea for forgiveness. He cried aloud, though his words were lost in the storm. Do you see me now? Do you see I fight still? The faceless giant loomed closer, its tendrils writhed, seizing men in bundles, crushing them like fruit, their blood steaming in the night. Mikhail hurled himself toward it, axe flashing. "Monster!" he roared. "If God is silent, then his servant still speaks." The giant's tendrils whipped him aside. He crashed against the stones, coughing blood, but he rose again, staggering, laughter spilling with each cough. "If faith is madness, then let me die mad." He struck again and again, tearing chunks of shadow, until at last the giant impaled him through the chest. Still he clung, still he laughed, until he fell limp, crucified upon the tendrils. Ivan saw it all. His heart broke anew, but something within him hardened. With a cry that was both grief and defiance, he rushed forward. The dragon, sensing his resolve, lowered its massive head. Ivan leapt, landing upon its back. Together they surged into the heart of the nightmare. The dragon's wings unfurled, casting winds that toppled buildings. Its fire erupted, not in streams, but in a single, blinding storm that consumed the faceless giant. Ivan, atop its neck, drove his blade into the tendrils that writhed around them. The night shrieked. The city itself seemed to scream. The faceless giant convulsed, its chest splitting open, releasing not organs, but thousands of smaller horrors that scattered like sparks. The dragon roared, a sound so vast it shook the earth. For a moment, the world was fire, screams, and light. And then, silence. The giant collapsed, its body dissolving into smoke. The remaining creatures scattered into the shadows, vanishing like nightmares at dawn. The fires dimmed, leaving only embers. Ivan slid from the dragon's back, collapsing to his knees amid the ruins. Bodies lay everywhere. Comrades, monsters, friends. Sergei gone, Mikhail pierced and broken. Only the dragon stood, wings folded, golden eyes still burning. Aftermath. The silence was unbearable. Ivan clutched his blade, now broken, and whispered, "All gone. All but you." The dragon lowered its head, its gaze upon him. For the first time, Ivan did not demand words, nor forgiveness. He only bowed, forehead touching the blood-soaked stones. And in that silence, amid the ashes of the night of screams, Ivan understood there would be no absolution, only burden. But to bear it, to live, to remember, was itself a kind of answer. Chapter 5. Ashes and Burdens. The dawn after the night of screams came without color. No sun dared to pierce the haze that hung over Saint Veyra. The sky was a bruised gray, heavy as lead, pressing down upon the ruins of the once living city. Smoke coiled sluggishly from broken stones, and in the silence one could almost believe time itself had ceased its march, as though the world had grown weary of moving forward. Ivan stood among the ruins, sword broken at his feet, hands raw from gripping ash and steel. His hair clung in clumps to his blood-streaked forehead, his eyes hollow and red. He had not slept. He had not dared. The corpses around him, men, beasts, monsters, all seemed too alive in their stillness, as if one more breath, one more groan might crawl out from their throats. The dragon lingered nearby. It sat upon the remnants of a tower, wings folded like great black curtains, its golden eyes half shuttered yet never closed. Its breath rose in slow waves, stirring the ash at its feet. Ivan glanced at it often, not in awe, not in fear, but in something more ambiguous, something closer to dependence. It was not comrade, nor master, nor God, but Its silence anchored him. Without that vast presence, he feared he might dissolve entirely into madness. The weight of survivorship. Around him lay the remnants of those who had stood beside him. Sergei, or what remained of him, was nowhere to be found. Whether consumed, scattered, or absorbed into nightmare, Ivan could not know. Yet he remembered the mad gleam in Sergei's eyes, the laughter that bled into his final cries. Mikhail, by contrast, was unmistakable. His body hung slumped against a shattered column, tendrils still impaled through his chest. His eyes were open, yet strangely calm, as though death had restored to him the peace that life and faith had stripped. Ivan knelt before him, fingers trembling as he brushed the dust from his beard. "You were mad too," he whispered hoarsely, "but your madness was brighter than mine. You died for a God who would not answer. Perhaps that is nobler than living in silence." He closed Mikhail's eyes with 2 fingers, and for a moment a strange warmth passed through him. Not forgiveness, not peace, but the recognition of kinship and torment. All around, the dead lay in grotesque tableau, men embracing as they burned, creatures frozen mid-scream, twisted faces reflecting both agony and ecstasy. It was as though the battlefield had become a gallery of human and inhuman suffering, curated by death itself. Ivan felt both reverence and nausea in equal measure. The monologue of ashes. He wandered the ruins, speaking aloud, though no one listened. "Why was I spared? Tell me, silence. Tell me why I walk when others lie cold." Sergei denied God, mocked him to his face, and yet he burned with more certainty than I. Mikhail gave everything to faith, clung to it even when it crucified him. And I doubt, I stumble, I kill my own brother in blindness. And still I remain. What justice is this? Is survival not the cruelest punishment of all? He stopped, clutching his chest, as if the weight of his words might split his ribs. His voice cracked. "They say guilt is a prison of the soul. But no, it is worse. It is freedom. To wake, to walk, to choose again and again while the dead are silent. What am I to do with such freedom? Live? Live for what? For whom?" The dragon shifted. Its eyes opened fully. Ivan turned to it, trembling. "You hear me, don't you? You understand. You are silent because you know words are alive, but tell me this at least. Do you suffer? Or is your silence a mercy I will never have?" The dragon's golden gaze held him. It breathed slowly, and in that rhythm Ivan felt his rage dull, though not his sorrow. Memories like wounds. Exhaustion overtook him, and at last he collapsed among the ruins, head resting against the blackened stones. His mind swam with visions. He saw his brother again, not smiling this time, but staring at him with a gaze that was too familiar, too much like the dragon's, silent, endless, unbearable. In his dream, his brother spoke at last. "You killed me, Ivan, not by chance, but by your hand, and yet I forgive you still. But tell me, what is forgiveness worth if you will not accept it?" Ivan woke up with a cry, gasping, clutching his chest. His hands shook as he pressed them against his face. "No," he muttered. "No, I cannot accept. To accept is to live, and to live is the greater crime." Dialogue with the dragon. Night crept again, though the sky never cleared. Ivan sat beside the dragon's massive head, staring into its unblinking eyes. His voice was softer now, as though speaking to a confidant. "You know, I almost envy Sergei. He died believing in nothing. No burden, no meaning, no chains of hope or guilt. He was free. Mikhail, by contrast, was unmistakable. His body hung slumped against a shattered column, tendrils still impaled through his chest. His eyes were open, yet strangely calm, as though death had restored to him the peace that life and faith had stripped. Ivan knelt before him, fingers trembling as he brushed the dust from his beard. "You were mad too," he whispered hoarsely, "but your madness was brighter than mine. You died for a God who would not answer. Perhaps that is nobler than living in silence." He closed Mikhail's eyes with 2 fingers, and for a moment a strange warmth passed through him. Not forgiveness, not peace, but the recognition of kinship and torment. All around, the dead lay in grotesque tableau, men embracing as they burned, creatures frozen mid-scream, twisted faces reflecting both agony and ecstasy. It was as though the battlefield had become a gallery of human and inhuman suffering, curated by death itself. Ivan felt both reverence and nausea in equal measure. The monologue of ashes. He wandered the ruins, speaking aloud though no one listened. "Why was I spared? Tell me, silence, tell me why I walk when others lie cold." Sergei denied God, mocked him to his face, and yet he burned with more certainty than I. Mikhail gave everything to faith, clung to it even when it crucified him. And I doubt, I stumble, I kill my own brother in blindness, and still I remain. What justice is this? Is survival not the cruelest punishment of all? Exhaustion overtook him, and at last he collapsed among the ruins, head resting against the blackened stones. His mind swam with visions. He saw his brother again, not smiling this time, but staring at him with a gaze that was too familiar, too much like the dragon's, silent, endless, unbearable. In his dream, his brother spoke at last. "You killed me, Ivan, not by chance, but by your hand, and yet I forgive you still. But tell me, what is forgiveness worth if you will not accept it?" Ivan woke up with a cry, gasping, clutching his chest. His hands shook as he pressed them against his face. "No," he muttered. "No, I cannot accept. To accept is to live, and to live is the greater crime." Dialogue with the dragon. Night crept again, though the sky never cleared. Ivan sat beside the dragon's massive head, staring into its unblinking eyes. His voice was softer now, as though speaking to a confidant. "You know, I almost envy Sergei. He died believing in nothing. No burden, no meaning, no chains of hope or guilt. He was free. Mikhail, by contrast, was unmistakable. His body hung slumped against a shattered column, tendrils still impaled through his chest. His eyes were open, yet strangely calm, as though death had restored to him the peace that life and faith had stripped. Ivan knelt before him, fingers trembling as he brushed the dust from his beard. "You were mad, too, but your madness was brighter than mine. You died for a God who would not answer. Perhaps that is nobler than living in silence." The dragon's eye flickered, a faint reflection of fire in its depths. Ivan leaned closer, whispering, "If you are my judge, then judge me. If you are my brother, then forgive me. If you are only beast, then devour me. Anything but this waiting." The dragon's breath washed over him, hot, heavy, like the exhale of a furnace. But still, no word. Ivan pressed his forehead to the creature's scales, his voice breaking. "Then I will carry it. Do you hear me? I will carry it all. The guilt, the silence, the weight of being left alive. If no God will witness, then let you be my witness. And if even you are only a mirror, then I will speak to my own reflection until I am ash." Closing of Chapter 5. Thus the city of Saint Veyra lay in ruins, a tomb without mourners. Only Ivan and the dragon endured, bound not by faith or denial, but by silence. And as the days crawled onward, Ivan began to feel the slow, cruel truth. Survival is not triumph. It is burden. To live is to confess endlessly to a witness who never answers. And so the man and the beast remained among ashes, one breathing fire, the other breathing guilt, both waiting for what silence would demand of them next. Chapter 6. The Journey Beyond Ashes. The sun, when it finally rose, was pale and timid, as though it, too, feared to illuminate the city that had survived only to rot in silence. The streets of Saint Veyra, once bustling with life and laughter, were now veins of ash and stone, arteries clogged with corpses, debris, and smoke that rose sluggishly to a sky that seemed indifferent. Ivan Petrovich walked through it all, dragging his boots over charred masonry, his broken sword slung across his back. The dragon followed in measured steps, each one shaking the ground slightly, but it moved with a patience that seemed almost mournful. Its wings, though folded, rustled occasionally, reminding Ivan of the creature's latent power, a reminder that this was no companion like a man, no friend in the ordinary sense, but something greater, or perhaps more terrible, a mirror, a judge, a reminder of all he could never forget. Carrying the weight. Ivan spoke little, but his mind was a tumult of voices, memories, doubts, confessions. He walked past collapsed towers and broken fountains, past alleys where the smell of smoke and blood lingered like a bitter perfume. He imagined the faces of those who had fallen, Mikhail, serene in death, his faith both vindicated and meaningless, Sergei, laughing even as he was consumed by darkness, the soldiers, the women, the children, their screams and silence forever echoing in his mind. He whispered to the dragon, "Do you see them? Do you remember? Can you forgive what must remain unforgiven?" The dragon's golden eyes regarded him, unblinking, its breath warm against his neck. It offered no answer, only the steady weight of its presence. And in that silence, Ivan understood that some questions have no reply but witness. Perhaps witness is enough, he thought. Perhaps silence is the only absolution the living receive. Encounters on the road. Their path led them away from the city, into fields once golden with wheat, now blackened and torn by fire. The air was still heavy with the memory of death. But in the distance, faint signs of other survivors appeared. Smoke from makeshift fires, shadows moving through the tall grass. Ivan approached cautiously, sword drawn. The dragon's wings lifted slightly, a shadow cast across the field like an ominous herald. A small group of humans emerged, ragged, fearful, some clutching children, others brandishing crude weapons. Their eyes widened at the sight of the dragon, but they did not flee, for in a world ravaged by horrors, legends are often met with awe more than fear. One of them, a woman with hair like ash, stepped forward. Are you a savior? Or another herald of death?" Ivan lowered his sword slightly, though not fully. He shook his head. "Neither," he said. "I am a man who survives, as you do. And this creature is my witness. We carry burdens. Perhaps together we can endure what we cannot face alone." The woman's eyes glistened. She seemed to understand, not hope, but the fragile recognition that survival itself is a kind of pact, a choice to walk on even when the world is burned. Reflections on guilt and hope. That night, they camped in a ruined barn, the dragon folded in a circle outside, its body a black sentinel against the stars. Ivan sat beside the fire, staring into the flames, feeling their warmth as both comfort and torment. He whispered again, this time to the emptiness around him. Perhaps survival is not triumph, but endurance. Perhaps to live is to bear all that has been lost and all that we cannot change. And yet, even in this burden, there is a strange flicker, a reminder that life persists, stubbornly, brutally, beautifully, even here. The dragon rumbled low, as though acknowledging the truth in his words, or perhaps simply agreeing to continue its vigil. Ivan closed his eyes, imagining his brother's face once more, not in accusation, not in forgiveness, but in recognition. You walk forward, despite it all. You endure. As dawn approached, the dragon lifted its head, nostrils flaring, eyes scanning the horizon. Ivan followed its gaze and saw shadows moving in the distance, not survivors, not beasts, but something else entirely. Something that had observed the night of screams from afar, waiting, patient, inevitable. Ivan tightened his grip on his sword. So the journey continues, he whispered, and we must face what follows whether we are ready or not. The dragon shifted, spreading its wings, ready to rise. Ivan climbed onto its back, and together they launched into the pale sky, carrying with them the weight of the dead, the weight of guilt, and the fragile hope that even amidst ruin, survival might have meaning. And in that flight, Ivan felt it, the strange, terrifying freedom of being alone with one's sins, yet moving forward anyway. Chapter 7. Shadows Among the Survivors. The road from Saint Veyra stretched endlessly beneath a sky washed in ash and muted gold. Fields that once swayed with wheat now lay flattened, blackened by fire or trampled under the march of unseen horrors. Ivan and the dragon moved slowly, each step heavy with thought, silence, and the weight of memory. The dragon's massive body cut a path through the wasteland, its golden eyes scanning constantly, alert yet patient. Ivan rode upon its back, sword strapped at his side, cloak torn and soot-stained. He did not speak, though thoughts swirled in his mind like smoke. Survival had taught him one cruel truth. All who lived were haunted, not by monsters alone, but by the memory of those already consumed. The first signs of life. At midday, distant smoke rose like a fragile plea. Ivan felt his pulse quicken. Perhaps, he thought, there were still human eyes to meet, human voices to hear, human hands that might still offer solidarity rather than despair. They approached cautiously, the dragon lowering its massive head so as not to alarm the inhabitants of a small encampment hidden in the ruins of an old monastery. Figures moved among the debris, men, women, and children, their faces pale, their bodies thin, their eyes haunted. They had survived, yes, but barely. A woman with hair like storm clouds stepped forward, gripping a crude spear. "Who comes?" she demanded. Her voice was strong, though her hands shook. "Are you friend or beast?" Ivan slid from the dragon's back and lowered his sword. "We are survivors, like you," he said softly. "And this creature," he gestured to the dragon, "is neither friend nor foe, but witness. We carry burdens. Perhaps you do as well." The woman studied him, and, after a long silence, she nodded. "Then perhaps we can speak." The morality of survival. They sat by the remnants of a fire, sharing meager rations, though words proved heavier than food. Stories spilled forth, families lost, cities burned, children stolen or devoured by creatures beyond imagination. Ivan listened, weighed each word, each tear, as though measuring the human soul with scales unseen. A man named Anton, tall and hollow-eyed, spoke with trembling honesty. "We survive, yes, but at what cost? We steal, we lie, we kill, not because we wish, but because we must. Every choice is a sin, every action a condemnation. How does one remain human when all the world conspires to destroy it?" Ivan's lips pressed into a thin line. "I have asked myself that same question countless times," he said. "And yet, to remain human is not to be unbroken. It is to endure, to face the guilt, and carry it. That is our only defiance against the abyss." The dragon stirred, wings brushing the stones as though acknowledging the weight of his words. New threats emerged. Night fell slowly, and with it a new horror revealed itself. From the distant forests, figures emerged. Not fully human, not fully creature. Their forms shimmered in the pale moonlight, limbs twisted, faces elongated, eyes glimmering with unnatural intelligence. Unlike the mindless beasts Ivan had fought before, these were deliberate, calculating, as though they had learned from the chaos and death of Saint Veyra. Anton's group shrank back, panic in their eyes. "We cannot fight them," he whispered. "We are too few." Ivan's hand rested on the hilt of his broken sword. "We may not have a choice." The dragon rose, wings unfurling, casting shadows over the encampment like a moving fortress. Its eyes met Ivan's. "Then we endure again," Ivan said, voice steady despite the terror. The philosophical clash. As the first creatures advanced, Ivan realized the battle was not only of body, but of spirit. Anton and the others looked to him, seeking guidance, seeking meaning in a world that offered none. "Do we kill them?" one child asked, trembling. "Or let them pass?" Ivan closed his eyes, hurt heavy. He finally said, "We fight. Not for glory, not for triumph, not for vengeance, but because to do nothing is to surrender our humanity. Even in slaughter, we assert that we remain human, that we choose to endure." Mikhail's memory haunted him, the faith-driven man now gone, crucified on the tendrils of the faceless giant. Sergei's nihilism whispered in his mind, mocking the very idea of choice. Yet he gripped the hilt of his sword anyway. The dragon roared, and the night trembled. The night's battle. The creatures moved like liquid shadows, striking with precision, dismembering with care, mocking the chaos that had defined Ivan's last fights. But the dragon's fire was as brilliant as sunlight, a force of raw devastation. Ivan fought alongside it, his sword striking at limbs and eyes, each swing a confession, each parry a prayer. Anton and the survivors joined as they could, fighting with desperation rather than skill. Fear was their weapon, courage their shield. And through it all, Ivan realized again the brutal truth. Survival demands moral compromise, endurance of guilt, and the willingness to face horror with both hands unflinching. By dawn, the creatures were driven back, though not all were destroyed. The survivors lay panting, bloodied, trembling. And Ivan, atop the dragon's back, looked over the field, understanding that the world beyond Saint Veyra would never offer peace. Only more trials, more decisions, more unbearable weight. Closing reflection. As the sun rose over charred forests and blackened fields, Ivan spoke to the dragon. "We endure," he said softly. "We carry the sins of those who fell, the guilt of those who live, the memory of all that is lost. We do not fight for victory, nor hope, nor even life itself. We fight to remain human, and perhaps that is enough." The dragon lowered its head, massive eyes reflecting the pale light, and for the first time Ivan felt a strange kinship, a recognition that their paths, though terrifying, shared a common truth. To exist is to suffer, to fight, and to bear witness. And so they moved forward again. Shadows among survivors, carrying ashes, guilt, and the faintest flicker of hope in a world that offered nothing but weight and silence. Chapter 8. The Mines of Shadow. The road stretched endlessly beneath skies of muted gray, clouds hanging low like mourning veils. Ivan rode the dragon, the beast's wings slicing the stagnant air with slow, deliberate power. Every beat of its wings seemed to echo the weight of thought in Ivan's mind, memories, guilt, and visions that refused to die. Since the battle among the survivors, he had not slept, nor had the dragon. The night of screams was behind them, but a new tension pressed forward like a living thing. Ivan had felt it the moment they entered the forested pass. The world itself seemed to hold its breath, anticipating confrontation not with beasts, but with intelligence that was crueler because it calculated, reasoned, and understood fear. The first encounter. By midday, shapes emerged from the mist. Tall, wiry figures that moved with the precision of predators, their faces partially masked by the shadows of hoods and twisted masks. Unlike the grotesque creatures that had attacked Saint Veyra, these were coordinated, observing, seemingly capable of thought and strategy. Their eyes glimmered like cold metal, and Ivan knew immediately this was no ordinary enemy. A woman stepped forward from the leading figures, her voice clear and haunting. "You survived the night of screams," she said, tone more statement than question. Impressive, though hardly extraordinary. What is extraordinary is the weight you carry, the sins you cannot shed. Tell me, Ivan Petrovich, does your guilt guide you, or does it enslave you? Ivan's grip on his sword tightened. "I carry what I must," he said. "I do not know if it guides or enslaves. I only know it is mine, and I endure." The woman tilted her head. "Endurance is admirable, yes, but it is also a prison. One can endure endlessly, yet remain powerless. Would you not seek freedom from it?" The dragon stirred beside him, wings half raised, its golden eyes reflecting the woman's own, sharp, calculating, piercing. Philosophical dilemma. The woman, whom Ivan came to understand as Mayalis, spoke not as a warrior, but as a philosopher of darkness. Her group had survived the collapse of civilizations, not by brute force, but by cunning, manipulation, and a cold logic that scorned morality. You call yourselves human, yet all humans are liars, killers, hypocrites. You fought beasts and called it courage, yet you spared some for reasons you cannot articulate. Why? Because you believe in morality? Or because your conscience cannot allow total destruction? Ivan did not respond immediately. He remembered Mikhail's faith, Sergei's nihilism, and the cries of the dead in Saint Veyra. Morality is a weight. Yes, but even under weight, one can act. Even under guilt, one can choose. You may call it foolishness, but action is the only truth I know. Mayalis laughed softly, almost with respect. Foolishness, yes, but admirable. It is rare to see a man continue when every reason to collapse exists. Mayalis gestured to her group. With an eerie coordination, they struck. Not to kill immediately, but to probe, to analyze, to force Ivan and the dragon into reaction. Each attack was a puzzle, an ambush, a feint, a moral trap. One survivor of Ivan's group was captured instantly, though no harm came yet. The creatures did not merely fight. They tested decisions, watched hesitation, calculated panic. The dragon roared, fire erupting in controlled bursts, incinerating some while Ivan leapt into the fray, protecting the innocents caught between strategy and slaughter. Every action demanded thought. Every reaction weighed with the knowledge of consequences. Existential horror. As battle raged, Ivan realized this enemy was more terrifying than the night of screams. They understood human fear, human morality, human guilt. Each strike and defense became a question. Are you justified? Are you humane? or merely self-serving? Anton, one of the survivors, looked at him, fear etched across his face. Ivan, they aren't like the others. They know us. They see us. Yes, and that is why we must endure. If survival teaches anything, it is that we must act even when every choice is imperfect, even when guilt is inevitable. The dragon's wings beat with thunderous rhythm, clearing paths, creating openings, as Ivan made impossible choices again and again. The survivors learned quickly: action without pause, thought without hesitation, morality tempered by necessity. Turning the tide, hours passed, exhaustion draped over them like a wet cloak. But Ivan realized that intelligence, no matter how precise, has limits: predictability, assumptions, underestimation. He used the dragon as a pivot, drawing the enemy into traps of fire and momentum. Mayalis herself faced him finally, sword in hand, eyes gleaming with cold insight. You are persistent, but persistence is not victory. You cannot save all, you cannot forgive all, you cannot endure endlessly. Ivan's reply was simple, though it carried the weight of every death, every memory, every moment of guilt. Perhaps, but I endure anyway. The dragons surged, pinning Mayalis' forces against the terrain while Ivan forced a choice: surrender or death. Mayalis hesitated, recognizing in him not only endurance, but the terrifying moral clarity of someone who would carry every burden of consequence. She vanished into the shadows with a final warning. Then endure, Ivan Petrovich, but remember, intelligence, cunning, and shadow will follow you always. You are never free. Aftermath. The survivors, though shaken, lived. Their faith in Ivan, tempered by terror, had grown. The dragon's presence was no longer merely protection, it was the line between human error and annihilation. Ivan sat alone, watching the horizon, reflecting on Mayalis' words. She had been right. Endurance was not freedom. It was a prison of choice, a testament to human limitation. And yet it was all he had. He whispered to the dragon, "We will walk this path, witness to suffering, carriers of guilt, architects of survival. The world may offer no meaning, but we endure, and that alone may be enough." The dragon shifted, golden eyes glinting in agreement, and together they continued onward, leaving behind ashes, shadow, and survivors who would carry their own burdens, inspired by a man and a creature bound by endurance. Chapter 9: The Silent Citadel. The Silent Citadel rose from the mist like a wound upon the earth. Towers of black stone, jagged and leaning as if burdened by centuries of neglect, pierced the sky. Windows were empty, toothless gapes that stared into nothing. Yet, despite the silence, the place felt alive, aware. Ivan dismounted from the dragon, boots crunching against gravel and shattered masonry. The dragon lowered its massive head, nostrils flaring as if sniffing the memories in the stones themselves. Ivan ran his hand over the cold wall of the outer gate, feeling the weight of centuries, the lingering grief of forgotten souls. "Why do we come here?" Anton whispered, trembling. "No one survives inside. Not truly." Ivan did not answer. The question had no answer. Not in words. He only knew that the path of endurance, the journey they had taken, demanded this next step. To move forward was to confront what others could not face: the silence that observes all, the weight that judges without mercy.
The threshold. The gate creaked open with a sound that seemed to echo through time itself. Inside, the streets were wide but crumbling, lined with buildings that seemed more like tombs than homes. The air smelled of damp stone and memory, the scent of lives long extinguished. Ivan led the way, sword at hand. The dragon followed, wings partially spread, muscles taut. Shadows clung to every corner, and Ivan knew instinctively the city watched. It judged. It tested those who dared enter. A sound emerged, a whisper, not from lips, but from the stones themselves. It carried questions. Who are you? Why do you walk this path? Do you deserve to continue? Ivan pressed his fingers to his temples. I am a man who survives, he muttered. I endure because to stop is to surrender all meaning. Even if meaning is absent, I endure. The city seemed to pause, the shadows recoiling, as if acknowledging his words. Yet acknowledgement brought no relief. The mirror statue rippled, and suddenly the square filled with apparitions, visions of every life Ivan had touched, every creature slain, every human lost. Confrontation with the mind. The apparitions were not hostile, but insistent, questioning, probing. They forced Ivan to relive the night of screams, the battle among survivors, the encounter with Melis, every decision that had carried consequences he could neither undo nor escape. You spared some, one apparition said. Why? Why not all? You struck without mercy, another whispered. Why not show compassion? You endure, a third intoned. But for whom? For what? Ivan's voice cracked. Because to stop is impossible. Because I am not free. Because survival is not triumph, only burden. I do not know why. I only know that I endure. The apparitions recoiled, as though the raw honesty of endurance itself was a blade. Shadows dissipated into the stones. Silence followed. A passage opened beneath the statue, descending into darkness. Ivan and the dragon entered. The air grew colder, heavier. The walls pulsed subtly, as if alive. Whispers returned, not accusatory this time, but contemplative. Will you choose rightly when no one watches? Will you act with integrity when all is lost? The dragon's breath misted in the cold air. Ivan's thoughts swirled with memories and philosophies, each step a meditation. They descended deeper, encountering remnants of a civilization that had understood both power and despair, intelligence and cruelty. Artifacts of science intertwined with ritual, books scorched but not destroyed, machinery corroded yet intact, reminders of knowledge and ambition now bent towards silence. At last, they reached a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. At its center, an orb floated, pulsing with faint light, as if holding the heartbeat of the citadel itself. Ivan felt the weight of centuries pressing upon him. The ultimate test, the orb spoke without words, thought without form, presenting visions of possible futures, survival, ruin, redemption, despair. Ivan saw paths he could take, choices he might make, consequences he could never avoid. The dragon shifted beside him, golden eyes reflecting the orb's light. Ivan understood, to claim passage, he must confront not the creature before him, not the apparitions behind, but the sum of his own conscience. Every guilt, every sin, every burden he carried. He knelt and whispered, I am not innocent. I have failed, I have killed, I have watched and done nothing when I could act. Yet I endure. I do not seek forgiveness, nor absolution, nor reward. I endure because to do otherwise is impossible. This is my choice, my truth, my burden. The orb pulsed brighter, shadows receding. Silence embraced the chamber, vast and complete. Ivan rose, exhausted yet unbroken. The citadel had tested him, not physically, not morally in conventional terms, but
existentially. He had survived judgment, confronted his conscience, and remained standing. Departure. Ivan emerged from the citadel at dawn. The city, silent but alive with memory, seemed to acknowledge him with a subtle wind through its streets. The dragon unfurled its wings, carrying Ivan into the sky once more. "Forward," he whispered. "We endure. We witness. We carry the weight, and yet we move. That is our path." Below, the ruins stretched endlessly, and Ivan understood that the world would never grant peace, nor mercy, nor clarity. Only trials, endurance, and the faint glimmer of meaning we carve from ashes. And with the dragon, Ivan flew into the unknown, a witness and survivor, a man who bore both guilt and courage, the weight of all that had been lost, and the fragile hope of what might yet be saved. Chapter X: The Eclipse of Fire. The horizon burned, not with sun but with the glow of a firestorm, distant and growing, as though the earth itself had erupted in fury. Ivan and the dragon hovered above the ruins of what had once been civilization, the weight of all they had witnessed pressing like lead on their minds and hearts. The world had become a crucible. Monsters, survivors, and shadows alike had converged toward a single point, a vortex of chaos that demanded resolution. And Ivan, burdened by memory and guilt, knew that the final confrontation awaited, not only with creatures or men, but with the culmination of his own conscience. The approach. The dragon's wings beat against the turbulent air, carrying them over forests blackened by fire and rivers thick with ash. Ivan stared below, seeing shapes writhe in the smoke, figures that were neither fully human nor fully beast, reflecting all he had fought and all he had feared. Anton, who had remained close, whispered, Can we survive this?" Ivan did not answer. Words had failed him too many times. Instead, he gripped the hilt of his sword, feeling the scars in his palms, the weight of death on his shoulders. Survival was no longer the question. Endurance was the only truth he could claim. The first clash. At the center of the storm stood the Eclipse, a monstrous entity, taller than any man, its body a fusion of fire, shadow, and intelligence. Its eyes glowed with a terrible awareness, and Ivan understood immediately. This was the apex of all they had faced, a being born of chaos and judgment, demanding both physical combat and moral reckoning. The dragon roared, unleashing fire in brilliant torrents. The Eclipse shifted, tendrils of shadow and flame writhing, avoiding destruction, calculating, learning. Every strike of fire, every swing of Ivan's blade became a question. Do you have the courage to endure your own choices? Can you survive knowing each action will carry consequence beyond imagination? Anton and the survivors fought desperately, but Ivan knew the outcome was not theirs alone. This confrontation belonged to him, the dragon, and the weight of all humanity that lingered in his conscience. Trial of conscience. As the eclipse struck, Ivan felt visions of the dead sweep through him. Mikhail, Sergei, his brother, every lost survivor. Each image was accusatory, questioning, demanding justification. You endure, but what have you earned? What have you protected? What is left to carry? Ivan's voice rose, hoarse yet resolute. I carry it all. Every sin, every death, every failure. And yet I endure. I do not seek glory. I do not seek absolution. I endure because to stop is to surrender everything. That is my choice, my truth, my burden. The eclipse recoiled, as if his declaration of endurance struck it more than fire or steel could. Shadows trembled, the storm paused. The climactic battle. The dragon rose higher, wings beating like thunder, flames cascading from its mouth. Ivan leapt onto its neck, his broken sword blazing with borrowed fire. They struck together, a fusion of man and beast, spirit and action, endurance and fury. The Eclipse lashed with tendrils of shadow and flame, each attack a test of resolve. Ivan ducked, parried, and drove his sword into the creature's heart of darkness, feeling his own guilt and memories surge with every blow. Time seemed suspended. Battles from the Night of Screams, the encounter with Malice, and the trials of the Silent Citadel replayed in flashes. Ivan realized victory was not annihilation, not conquest, not triumph. Victory was the act of enduring, the choice to face horrors and continue moving forward, carrying the burden of all he had witnessed. The Eclipse collapsed, dissolving into smoke and shadow. The firestorm dimmed. Silence returned, vast and absolute. Ivan slid from the dragon's back, exhausted but standing. Around him, survivors emerged from hiding, ragged but alive. The dragon lowered its massive head, golden eyes meeting Ivan's. No words were needed. They had endured. They had survived. And yet, the weight of survival was neither light nor simple. Ivan looked to the horizon. The world remained broken, but he understood endurance was the legacy of humanity. The burden of memory, of conscience, of guilt and compassion, that was the inheritance of those who lived. Closing reflection. Ivan spoke to the dragon, voice soft, almost a whisper. We are witness and survivor. We endure, though the world offers no reward, no absolution, no promise of peace. But to endure, to carry the weight, to confront what others cannot, that is enough. Perhaps it is the only meaning left. The dragon rumbled, wings stretching wide. Ivan climbed atop its back. Together they rose, soaring into the pale sky. The ruins lay below, silent and scorched, yet alive with the memory of what had been lost. And above, the wind carried the promise not of triumph, not of salvation, but of continued endurance, the strange, terrible, and beautiful truth of surviving in a world that tests every soul. Ivan closed his eyes. He bore the burden, he bore the witness, and he endured.